Okay, so this is the video for question 2, part C. The question asks, what's wrong with the English argument? So essentially, we have a valid argument with a false conclusion. So if you have a valid argument with a false conclusion, that means one of the premises must be false. So a good response for this question would be to identify one of the premises that you think is problematic and give some justification for why you think it's wrong. The two most common correct answers, or answers that I counted as correct, were that premise 3 was problematic and that premise 4 was problematic. Premise 3, it seems to kind of falsely assume that in order to reach the door, you need to perform an infinite number of actions in a finite period of time. But that seems incorrect, because even if you can divide up the space between yourself and the door into an infinite number of parts, those parts still all sum to a finite value, right? So if we look at the argument, it kind of appeals to this like dividing in two kind of idea, right? Take halfway point between the door, the quarter point between you and the door, the eighth way point between you and the door, but that series, 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16, that sums to 1. And so the total space between you and the door is still finite. The second correct response, although you didn't have to go into all that detail, just, yeah. The second response for premise 4 was a general similar kind of reasoning, except instead of the space between you and the door summing to a finite value, it was the time it takes summing to a finite value. So this response would be something like, you can actually perform an infinite number of actions in a finite period of time, but the time it takes to perform some of these actions is arbitrarily small. So for example, it might take you like half a unit of time to cross between you and halfway point between you and the door, a quarter unit of time to cross between you and the quarter way point between you and the door, and 1/16th of a unit of time, 1/32nd of a unit of time, etc. And so there's the same kind of summation thing going on, but it's just about time instead of distance. So those are two of the kind of good answers. If you responded something kind of a bit vague, like, oh, well, this argument kind of just ignores the laws of physics, and obviously you can't walk through the door, so the argument's wrong, I didn't really give that full marks, because it doesn't really explain what's wrong with the argument. It just kind of restates that the argument is wrong. There was a range of partial credit here and there, but those are kind of two of the ideal arguments, ideal responses.